Meghan Markle is trying to ignite her failing brand as ever, and she has come across what I'm sure she feels like is a gangbuster idea, which is matches. Yes, oh yes, Meghan Markle is hoping literal fire helps her sell her failing brand as ever.
Again on these matches. And she feels she's found the source or manufacturer of Meghan's
really?
Of her products before, and the matches, which you'll see it looks like it's pretty obvious. She's used these people before.
Because don't forget about me. Look what I'm doing. I'm doing that too. Here's what I think.
Yeah.
Aren't I cute? I'm just adorable. Watch me put this stuff on here.
She thought that she was creating a situation where she would be win-win and the royal family would be lose-lose.
She didn't just leave the royal world behind. She fully stepped out of it, walked away from the palaces, the titles, the whole heavy legacy. And now this week, we finally see what replaced it all. And it's a box of matches being sold at a price that'll seriously make your head spin just to light something that honestly feels like it was never meant to burn at all. And don't rush past this, because what comes after this is even more surprising than the first reveal. It all kicked off the same way it usually does with her now, through a carefully styled Instagram post that looked soft, polished, and almost too perfect to scroll past without noticing. There was a candle sitting neatly on a mantelpiece, flowers arranged like a magazine shoot, a teapot placed just right, and right beside it all, a fresh box of matches carrying her as ever, branding right on the front. The caption teased it like something big was coming, saying, "A small spark arriving tomorrow." But the twist was that tomorrow never really mattered here, because before people even processed it, the product was already live on her website, already available for purchase, no waiting.
However, I don't think this is going to work, just like everything else hasn't worked. And we even already have a blunder for this latest offerings, ladies and gentlemen.
Like, those come with a candle set. You get 4 candles and that matchbox.
You can't buy one candle separately?
Well, you can't, but that's how,
Because you buy a set.
Came
she's
out.
incentivizing
You can buy the signature scent collection.
I think Meghan Markle is completely devoid of any ideas. And this is just the latest example in a long line of them. So, guys, we are going to go over this today and some of the broader implications for, I think, the future of this company, because something I wrote last year is actually becoming ever more true by the day.
No build-up, just suddenly there. And that early drop turned what was supposed to be a simple launch into a confusing moment that had people questioning why a basic item was being treated like a major global release event. But here's where the situation starts to feel even more unusual, because the product itself doesn't behave the way a normal product should at all. The matches are being sold specifically to light her candles, but the candles themselves, reportedly, don't even have wicks inside them, none at all. So people quickly realize the strange loop happening here. You're being sold something meant to ignite a product that literally cannot ignite in the first place. That discovery spread fast, and people kept rereading the details like they missed something obvious the first time around. And once that realization hit, curiosity turned into suspicion, because if something this simple looks this off, then people start wondering what else in the system doesn't add up behind the scenes. Now, the money side of this is where things really start heating up in a way nobody expected, because the pricing structure adds another layer of confusion and frustration. One candle alone sits at around $64.
This brand is not doing well, and the woman in charge of it just seems to lack any notion of any sort of idea. Because as the brand doesn't sell, her solution to the problem, you could say, is, well, I have candles. We need matches. Yes. Oh, yes. Guys, believe it or not, it took me forever to click this thing to get this to work earlier. But we have matches. And to be fair, Meghan Markle is following something I had previously suggested, which is that, in order to sell stubborn inventory that's not selling, sometimes it's a fairly good idea to offer something free with it. And I believe that's what's happening here.
Which already puts it in a luxury category for something so basic. Then you look at the bundle. 4 candles, plus a box of matches for $256 before taxes and shipping. And suddenly, it doesn't feel like a casual product anymore. It feels like a premium lifestyle purchase being pushed hard. The matches are presented like a free bonus, even though they are essentially pennies in value compared to the total price. And once people started breaking it down, they noticed something even stranger. There's no real discount system working here at all. 2 candles plus matches equals $128, and 4 candles plus matches equals $256, which is basically just scaling up with zero savings involved. Even worse, buying smaller bundles twice actually gives you more matches than buying the bigger set, which makes the entire pricing logic feel backwards and oddly structured. It reached a point where people started comparing it to basic real-world selling logic, like kids running lemonade stands having clearer pricing strategies.
But you pay full price for every candle, right?
Guess how much 4 candles in that matchbox is?
The candles are like $50 each, aren't they? So I don't know, $212.
I'm going to say $231.
$256. For 4 fucking candles and those matches.
Who would buy these? I seriously can't imagine who would buy these unless you just were crazy about this idiot.
And then there's the drop she put out today. Remember, she teased it. There it is, right there.
Yeah. And you could buy 2 candles and the matches for $128, exactly half of the
Who would
4
do that?
candles.
Who would buy those? And I agree with her. If she finds out the candle or the matches are sold out, then you know it's BS. And that when she was saying, "Oh my God, sold out in 10 minutes," that couldn't have been more than just 100 or something. There's no way.
Than what's being presented here. Then the conversation shifts into something even more pointed. Who is this actually designed for in the first place? Because when you strip everything down, you're left with a very specific kind of buyer. Someone who sees branded matches online, tied to a candle that reportedly cannot even be lit properly, and still thinks it's worth buying instantly. That's not your average shopper browsing for home goods or lifestyle items. That's someone already emotionally invested, someone who buys into the branding itself more than the product function. And that's where things get interesting, because this suggests the entire setup isn't really built for expansion or attracting new customers at all. Instead, it feels like it's aimed at a very loyal core audience, people who already support the brand and are willing to buy anything attached to it, no matter how unusual or impractical it looks on paper. The matches then start to feel less like a simple accessory and more like a trigger point in the system, something designed to pull those loyal buyers deeper into the product line. And when a brand starts leaning more on loyalty than logic, more on devotion than clear value.
And this is just such a bare bones basic idea. She is treating this matches, something you can get for cents, like 50 cents, 25 cents. She's offering matches as like sort of a huge look at me style item. Now, if I refresh this page, is this still here? I guess it is, but this, guys, is actually supposed to go live tomorrow. A small spark arriving tomorrow. It's not tomorrow, Meghan. So this was posted 5 hours ago. And as of now, it's on your website already. So I believe there should be more time between that, like a full maybe 24 hours. Because she even has, let's see, back on stories here.
It starts raising bigger questions about where the strategy is actually headed. What looks like a polished brand on the surface is now starting to look like something quietly losing control behind the scenes. And the deeper people dig into the sourcing, the worse the picture seems to get. This is the point where things shift from curiosity into something far more uncomfortable for her narrative, because the details being uncovered are not what anyone expected at all. Investigators and online watchers who have followed her product drops for a while started doing what they always do, digging straight into the supply chain instead of just the marketing. And what they claim they found is that these matches aren't some custom luxury item at all, but instead appear to come from standard bulk wholesale suppliers online, the exact same type of low-cost source people suspect is behind her candle line too. These are the kinds of matches that are sold in massive quantities, sometimes for as little as a single cent per stick, when bought in bulk orders of hundreds or thousands. No branding magic, no artisan story, just factory-level supply being repackaged and relabeled like it's something exclusive and rare. Then comes the part that really set the internet on fire, because people started realizing something even more specific about the product design itself. These aren't just any matches being sold. They appear to match the exact style of cigar matches, the long wooden type made specifically for lighting cigars, not for aesthetic candle jars sitting on a shelf. So now you've got a situation where a product supposedly meant for luxury candles is paired with a completely different category of match altogether, and that mismatch immediately raised eyebrows everywhere it was discussed online. It made people question how something so basic could be presented in such a carefully curated luxury setting while missing such a fundamental detail. And then things got even more bizarre when people zoomed in on promotional photos and started counting individual matches in the box. A normal full box typically contains around 12 matches, but in her image, people claimed they only counted 11. Just one missing. But that tiny detail was enough to spark an entire wave of theories online. Some said maybe one was used for the photo shoot to create that lit candle moment, while others went further and suggested a more calculated idea, that maybe a match was removed intentionally from every box to stretch inventory or manage stock levels visually. There's no confirmed proof of that at all, but the fact that so many people immediately believed it without hesitation says a lot about how fragile the public trust has become around the brand right now. Once that doubt sets in, even the smallest detail starts looking suspicious under a microscope. So the real question starts forming in people's minds. Why would corners be cut this tightly on something being sold at such a premium price point? That question doesn't just sit quietly either, because the answer leads into something much deeper and far more complicated than just packaging or product design. And this is where the story starts shifting from surface-level criticism into structural concerns about how the entire operation is being run, because there's a bigger issue that many believe may have been completely overlooked. And it's not a small one at all. Matches are not simple retail accessories like candles or jars. They are classified as hazardous materials. And that changes everything about how they can be stored, packaged, and shipped. People with logistics and shipping experience started pointing this out immediately, explaining that flammable items like matches are often restricted for air transport, sometimes only allowed via ground shipping due to safety regulations involving friction, pressure, and altitude risks. That means extra compliance steps, special labeling requirements, protective packaging rules, and additional shipping costs that can quietly eat into any profit margin if not properly planned. And that's where more questions started piling up online, because people began wondering whether all of that was actually factored into the business model at launch at all. Some even openly questioned whether the shipping setup being used fully complies with regulations, or whether it was rushed into place without fully accounting for the legal complexity behind hazardous goods distribution. It's not just about selling a product anymore. It's about whether the infrastructure behind it is properly built to support it. But here's the part that industry-minded observers keep repeating over and over again. A properly structured business checks all of this before anything goes live. You don't accidentally release regulated products without fully understanding shipping law, packaging requirements, and compliance risk. And you definitely don't push a product live early without having those systems locked in first. So when people see things like timing mistakes or confusing product execution, it naturally raises bigger concerns about how the operation is being managed behind the scenes. And that leads straight into a more sensitive angle of the conversation, because people start questioning how such basic operational gaps could happen in a brand associated with high-level backing and major financial resources. With estimates floating around about multi-million-dollar property ownership and access to elite advisory teams, observers are struggling to understand how something so fundamental could slip through the cracks at all. That confusion is exactly what fuels even more speculation online, because gaps like that rarely stay unanswered in the public space. Then the conversation shifts again, and this is where things get even heavier, because some believe the answer isn't just internal mistakes. It's structural change behind the brand itself. Reports circulating online suggest that Netflix quietly stepped away from involvement with As Ever back in March, leaving behind a fully built system and, according to speculation, leftover inventory tied to the brand. That move, whether fully accurate in every detail or not, immediately changed how people interpret everything happening now. And here's the detail that really stuck with audiences. Netflix never actually placed these products in their own retail ecosystem. No store rollout, no platform-wide integration, nothing that would signal full commercial confidence in the product line. And for many observers, that absence speaks louder than any marketing campaign ever could. It raises questions about how much internal support the brand truly had from the beginning, and whether this was ever positioned as a long-term retail success or something far more experimental. So now, people are trying to picture the current situation being described online. A large volume of unsold or slow-moving inventory, reportedly sitting for extended periods, waiting for demand that isn't moving fast enough to clear it. And when you look at the website listings, people point out that seasonal or limited time items are still available long after their intended launch windows. Mother's Day themed products still appearing, Valentine related bundles still sitting, even winter style items like spice cider kits still listed during completely unrelated seasons. That kind of lingering stock creates a very different impression than the one originally marketed. And in that context, the matches start to look less like a standalone product and more like a strategic add-on, a small, inexpensive item positioned alongside high-ticket candles designed to encourage bundle purchases and move slower inventory before it stagnates further. Not necessarily as a centerpiece product, but as a tool to boost conversion rates on larger items that are harder to sell individually. At this point, the narrative being built online becomes less about a single product and more about overall momentum, strategy, and sustainability. And that's where viewers begin connecting the dots in different directions, trying to understand whether this is a brand scaling upward or one trying to stabilize while under pressure from inventory, pricing, and perception all at once. And as that conversation continues unfolding, people aren't just looking at matches anymore. They're looking at what those matches might represent in the bigger picture of everything happening behind the scenes right now. What people are now describing online is a long-running pattern of dependency and privilege that, according to critics, shaped the foundation of this entire lifestyle long before any brand ever existed. For years, the narrative being repeated in commentary circles paints a picture of a woman surrounded by extreme access, private jets allegedly arranged through wealthy acquaintances, luxury hotel stays reportedly covered by high-profile friends, and even early financial support said to include significant sums attributed to figures like Tyler Perry when they first arrived in California without stable housing or a clear financial structure in place. In that version of events, there was always someone nearby with deeper pockets, someone willing to step in, someone drawn toward proximity to fame, status, or royal association. And for a time, that environment created the impression that financial pressure simply didn't function the same way it does for ordinary businesses or ordinary lives. Because when external support is consistently available, the need to build independent systems of revenue budgeting and long-term financial stability can feel delayed, softened, or redistributed across a wider network of influence and generosity. But according to critics tracking the evolution of the brand and lifestyle over time, that dynamic doesn't last forever. Favors begin to fade, circles shift, relationships change. The people who once contributed financially, socially, or logistically begin to step back into their own lives, their own priorities, and their own boundaries. And once that support structure begins to loosen, the impact becomes immediate and unavoidable, because a lifestyle that once leaned on external assistance eventually has to stand on its own foundation. Cash flow has to come directly from sales, from products, from consistent consumer demand, not from informal networks of support or goodwill arrangements behind the scenes. And that's where critics begin asking the sharper question, what does it really indicate when someone previously associated with high-access environments and luxury travel is now tied to low-cost novelty items being sold at premium pricing under a lifestyle brand? For many online observers, that contrast doesn't read as reinvention, it reads as pressure. Every new launch becomes interpreted not as expansion, but as urgency disguised in branding. Every product drop becomes another attempt to convert attention into immediate revenue. And that leads back into one of the most heavily debated claims surrounding the brand from the beginning, the idea of instant sellouts and overwhelming demand. For a period of time, messaging around the products emphasized rapid disappearance, items selling out in minutes or hours, framed as proof of intense global demand and uncontrollable popularity. But as people began analyzing the pattern more closely, a different interpretation started circulating, because if initial stock levels are intentionally small, then rapid sellouts are not necessarily evidence of massive consumer demand. They can simply reflect limited availability designed to create urgency. And urgency-based marketing, while effective in short bursts, can create long-term instability in audience engagement, because once consumers repeatedly encounter sold-out messages, many eventually stop trying altogether. Curiosity fades, casual interest disappears, the audience narrows until only the most loyal supporters remain actively engaged. And critics argue that this creates a cycle where early hype is strong, but sustained growth becomes harder to maintain over time. Which is why some observers now suggest that what was once presented as overwhelming demand may not fully reflect long-term purchasing behavior. Instead, they argue it may reflect a mismatch between perception and reality, between how the brand was marketed and how it performs at scale. And from there, attention shifts from strategy to execution, because people didn't just analyze sales claims, they started examining the actual physical presentation of the products themselves. The Matchbox, for example, became a focal point of online discussion. Critics described the design as muted, minimal, and lacking the refinement typically associated with high-end lifestyle branding. The color palette, often described as dull or desaturated blue-gray, was compared by some users to generic household or office supplies, rather than curated luxury goods. Even typography and logo placement became part of the conversation, with viewers pointing out inconsistencies in branding style and execution across different product drops. And in luxury branding, consistency is not a small detail. It is the foundation of perceived value. When that consistency feels uneven, the entire product line can appear less cohesive, regardless of pricing or marketing. But criticism extended beyond packaging. Some of the strongest reactions reportedly came from actual customers who purchased products expecting premium quality and instead shared disappointment with what they received. In particular, fruit spreads and similar items became a repeated talking point online, with some buyers describing textures as thinner or less rich than expected. And when paying customers become the loudest critics, the conversation shifts entirely. It is no longer speculation or outside commentary. It becomes direct consumer feedback. And that feedback carries weight because it reflects lived experience with the product itself. At that point, branding cannot rely solely on aesthetics or storytelling. It must be supported by consistent product quality. Otherwise, no amount of polished photography or curated lighting can override the physical reality inside the jar, box, or package. Looking at the broader rollout over time, critics also point to what they see as a lack of consistent product direction. Early releases included items like leather bookmarks, some of which reportedly originated as promotional or giveaway-style pieces before being reintroduced as retail products. Later, variations of similar items followed, sometimes with slight wording changes or rebranding adjustments, but without a clearly expanding product ecosystem. Then came matches, then preserves, then home goods, then apothecary-style items, then stationery-like accessories. Each release feels connected through aesthetic branding, but not necessarily through a unified product strategy or long-term category focus. And that inconsistency fuels the argument that the brand is still searching for its identity rather than building upon a defined foundation, because strong consumer brands typically grow within a clear lane, expanding outward from a core category rather than shifting across multiple unrelated ones. And that leads into the most central criticism being repeated online, the idea that the brand is inseparable from the founder. Because in this structure, every product is tied directly to personal identity, personal milestones, and personal storytelling, weddings, family moments, lifestyle imagery, and curated glimpses into private life. Supporters may see that as authenticity. Critics see it as structural fragility, because when a brand is heavily dependent on a single identity, it becomes difficult to scale independently. Remove the central figure, and the structure may struggle to maintain coherence or direction. And that concern is reinforced when observers point to moments of reactive marketing, where posts appear timed closely to trending public discussions or viral moments elsewhere. One widely discussed example involves online commentary, suggesting that brand content followed closely after a viral royal-related interview moment, leading critics to describe it as reactive positioning rather than independent narrative building. Supporters interpret that as engagement with cultural moments. Critics interpret it as chasing relevance. And that divide shapes how the entire brand is perceived. As discussion continues, even fans have begun contributing mixed commentary, and some point out inconsistencies in availability. Others mention resale listings of previously sold-out products. Some even joke that the situation feels so chaotic, it seems almost impossible to be accidental. But underneath the humor, there is still serious debate about sustainability, strategy, and long-term direction. And then there is the emotional layer of criticism, where observers point out that certain product launches feel disconnected from broader real-world context, arguing that timing and cultural awareness are essential in consumer branding. At the same time, others push back strongly, arguing that online narratives often exaggerate patterns and that viral criticism can distort reality when repeated without full context. But regardless of perspective, what remains undeniable is that the brand has become a major subject of public scrutiny, with every detail, from packaging to pricing to timing, analyzed far beyond normal consumer engagement. And that brings the discussion to its final interpretation. A brand being evaluated not just as a product line, but as a reflection of identity, strategy, and long-term viability all at once. Because when critics map the full timeline together, they see what they interpret as inconsistency in direction, pressure-driven launches, and a reliance on personal narrative rather than structural expansion. And in that framing, even something as small as a match becomes symbolic, a tiny object presented as luxury, carrying far more meaning in perception than in function. And for many following the discussion, that contrast between symbolism and substance becomes the central tension of the entire story. Because in the end, what people are really debating is not just products, but whether the foundation behind them can actually hold. And if you follow this far, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more updates as this story continues to unfold.